Welcome to June, the month of midsummer, longer days, and for me often less sleep as I tend to wake at dawn. The end of May left us with more foxglove splendour and the end of the peonies, which are just coping with the now thoroughly dry ground, though a few of the smallest buds will not now open, they are dried out. But the show was a good one for plants that are still establishing themselves. Peonies are long-term plants, very long-lived, but also they take time to really settle into their stride. You can see here how dry the ground already is in places, except the woodland, which is still moist underneath. What a contrast from earlier in the year. Around the pond, the iris and hardy geranium pratense are complementing each other in shades of blues and purples and white. And as they finish and get dead-headed, the evening primroses open up at the back of the pond, picking up the yellow in the acer there. And coming later in June, the opening of the hemerocallis in various shades of rusty reds and yellows and deep dark purples. Their 1 day per flower individual blooming pattern comes on endless spikes that can last up to a month each. A very valuable plant for this time of year, and can tolerate sun and some shade, and rather dry conditions too in good soil. This one with striped flowers contrasts well against the slightly collapsing Persicaria red dragon, and that is against the wooden walls of our new raised terrace blocks. The woodland is now slowly filling up with the hydrangeas opening their florets. The white one is now open, and our favourite from the garden house in Dorset is transcendent in its shades of reds and blues and all possible hues in between. It truly is a glorious gift to this garden. I shall take cuttings this year for sure. But we have other pinks and reds, lace caps and mop heads, all wonderful luxurious blooms. In contrast to the hydrangeas, we have the impressive structural spires of aconitum, or monkshood, in shades of deep midnight blue. Well, those that are still standing after the recent unseasonal high winds, and aside them frothy stands of aruncas whose creamy white tails hang down with such elegance. The astilbes continue to bring bright splashes of colour, and the ferns slowly lose their fresh spring greens and golds and coppers and bronzes and start to darken into summer maturity. Whilst here you can see the damage to the hostas this year by the munching molluscs, the effects of a mild wet winter and rather cool spring. Yet elsewhere they're in flower, lovely fragrant white flowers. And with rather elegant bracts other than flowers, Cornus cusa Miss Saori is still going strong, and the tall, rusty or pink-coloured spikes of Regersia are starting to emerge. A final joy down here is Galenia, a delicate flower that hovers above others like tiny moths in sunlight. As we walk up to the main part of the upper garden, walking through the garden, the arches are now in flower with roses along both sides, and various clematis. Like this Sieboldi, which is only just hardy here, but in a frost-free garden it does okay. Though these latters are planted to have something in bloom each month, so not all arches have both right now. And on the flank path we have the effects of early sunlight through the leaves of the mixed shrub hedge, and the cascades of rambling roses still in flower. But on the other side of the path, a large clump of acanthus with their William Morris leaves. Oh, it's the other way round. They were here first, and he took from them for his designs. But I also love the interesting flowers which defy colour description. Up on the main terrace, we have the purple pom-poms of chives in full flower, a favourite of mine from the allium family, but delicious in potato salad too. Behind them are Abies coreana, which will have blue cones in a year or so more. In the tropical bed, the Tropicana leaf spires of cannas are starting to grow taller, the rich colours of Alstroemeria Indian summer, which flowers from now until the frosts, next to the amazing leaves of the Melianthus, which may not flower this year until very late on. The Fatsia japonica spider's web is also starting to make more of its presence felt, all circling a fig tree. All the little planters that we planted last year are making a better statement in this their second year. The climbers, 2 early clematis and a campsis for flower later on, planted up each side of the pergola, are filling out well too, and will soon be trained across the top. It's the intention to create more shade up here on very hot evenings when it's almost impossible to sit out. In the middle block, the cottage garden one, the roses are coming out, with Rhapsody in blue leading the way, already in its second flush of buds coming through, as the earliest ones are dead-headed, and supported in colour themes by the penstemon, which are opening their spires of colour in shades of blues and purples. On the dining table, we have 2 pots full of clipped climbing geranium, mostly white, though occasional pink flushes appear. It's a lovely little table centre. And on the smaller left side terrace, we have our usual array of pots full of eucomis, called pineapple lilies for good reason. Look at their punk hairdos. Just this one in flower now, but the rest will follow soon enough. In front of them a few pots of lilies, though these do need replanting at the end of this year, as they're starting to shrink rather than expand into their pots. David especially loves the lilies in pots as they remind him of our wedding. This seems a lifetime ago, but it's only 24 years this year. Also, there's a couple of dahlias yet to flower, and 2 more cannas, not as tall as the Tropicana ones in the border, but again, yet to come into any kind of splendour or flower. Halfway across the garden, just above the pond, is a white pointed hebe hedge, and on the edges and borders are other hebes. We planted these because they're great insect and pollinator attractors, and in previous years they have indeed been covered with various beetles and other pollinators, soldier beetles, hoverflies, bees, lots of solitary bees. This year they appear to be almost void of any flying insects. There are a couple of grass-dwelling butterflies like meadow browns flying around, but it is a noticeable signal that we are really losing far too much now, and far too quickly. Without the insects, the birds and the bats cannot feed. Now we have no bats at night to watch any more than we even had when we first moved here 7 years ago. We plant plants and bushes and trees because they are pollinator magnets, but the pollinators have to be alive to visit them. In some of our wild areas, there are some nearly 10-foot tall marsh thistles in flower. There are several around the wilder areas, and my joy, why I even want them to be here, was the arrival of a pair of goldfinches on one nearest the house, to peck at any aphids and later to eat the seed heads. I also saw the same goldfinches pecking at the seeds on the sorrel plants that are flowering through the upper wild glass areas. In terms of eating from this garden, this young apple tree is fruiting for its first proper year, and is utterly laden with small fruit. I shall pick about 2/3 off it and allow it to stand taller once more later today. We are starting to live well off our own produce now for the season. In the front garden, the first flowering flushes now need cutting back and making space for July's showstoppers, the best of which for me are the still very young phlomis and the lovely blue sea hollies or eryngiums. The grass is covered in yellow smooth hawksbeard flowers so much that we just couldn't cut them. They too should be covered in insects, but barely a few there either. I'm struggling with deep grief over the collapse of the ecosystems that have been allowed to progress at such alarming rates by our so-called leaders, who can't even lead us down the garden path effectively. But perhaps by the time this goes out, it will all have changed. In the spirit of mindful optimism, I shall share our spike with you. Right at the entrance to our drive, we have a row of yuccas, providing a sort of potential spiky hedge in the future. But for now, not that huge. But one flower spike on one of the plants has been a source of joy over the last few weeks, and here it is, in stages, emerging. You'll have to wait till next month for full glory though, but it's rather splendid, isn't it?